Welcome to Mindsight. November is all about nihilism and what that means for me, what that means in general, and what that means to me. Nihilism is severe, can be. I know that when, in terms of spirituality, there were moments in my life where I tended to have nihilistic thoughts, but I myself am not a nihilist, if that makes sense. And after reading so many books on the subject, I think that what happened is when I read Nietzsche, it could go either way. I could feel totally empowered, I could feel totally knowledgeable about a subject, or I can feel blah at the end of reading certain texts. And I know that thus spoke Zarathustra, that it kind of fills me with it kind of fills me with this feeling like, oh, this is a new lease on life, yay. I need a prophet to tell me about some shit. And then I read the genealogy of morals, and it's just like, it's kind of hard to read those kind of shit anyway. But at the end, I'm like, so I'm going to go over what they say nihilism is in terms of a definition. I want to read the definition to you first. The rejection of all religious and moral principles. Ooh. In the belief that life is meaningless. And this happens to a lot of us in the spiritual community and even those not in the spiritual community. I feel that the questions we humans have, especially when we're coming in terms of Nietzsche's philosophy of this, is that as humans, we have to have a meaning, or else it fills us with dread for the suffering that we do as humans inevitably will have to endure. And we have to have a meaning as to why we may suffer these things. And he was saying that if there is no meaning, because there's not, okay? And I mean that in there's no way for us to know the meaning. So therefore it is meaningless. But that shouldn't stop us from living. So many words there. For me, when I came upon a spiritual practice, the main question, like most people, we have this question of why sitting on our brains, okay? And I did to an extent, but mine was more of a what, where, how, when, instead of a why. When I was formulating my spiritual practice, I never asked, why am I here? What is the meaning of me? I always asked, well, where do I fit in? What can I do? Things like that. When am I relevant? How am I relevant? And I've always gotten answers to those questions, so I was able to build off of that. And I do think that you have to be open to the answers, because if you're going to ask the question to the ether and get an answer, and then it's not the answer that you were looking for, so you kind of disown that answer, I think that in and of itself is a form of self-sabotage, to be honest with you. And it can fill you, after so many times of not getting the message that you want, you will inevitably get filled with this feeling of nihilism. Many of us have that, well, what the hell's the point? What's the point? And I want to stress that for me, in my life, I never thought that life was meaningless. Even when I hit rock bottom, even when I was filled with emotions that threatened to pull me down all the way under, I still thought that there was a meaning, like an underlying meaning to life, even if we are just barely existing. And I'm going to use an example here from my life. I had a family member who I will say most of my family have lived simple lives. And I mean that in exactly how it sounds. You grow up, you get married, you have kids, you go to work every day, you drink yourself into a state of being able to exist in order to tolerate the stresses of human life, and then you die. That's a simple life. Okay? And what I realized was that there's nothing wrong with living a simple life. That if you had no goals, okay, no moral framework, no give a shit to know why you are here, and you just live, you're just existing. I kind of wrote this into my ancestor practice. There is a reason that you are here. Maybe the way in which you lived your simple life taught someone else how to live a better life. Or maybe you're here to birth the children that will make something of themselves. Anyway, the list is endless with this. But just because you yourself or you know people that live a simple life does not mean that their life was meaningless. And is it the same thing? Is life having no meaning the same as being nihilistic? I don't necessarily think that nihilistic people, that nihilists can shift their perspective. Once you have nihilistic thoughts, it doesn't necessarily mean you yourself are a nihilist. I just think that as you grow and evolve as a human, you shift out of certain mindsets, right? You shed and you grow, and you shed and you grow, and you kind of can shift out of your nihilistic tendencies, your nihilistic mindset. But if you have fully converted over to the prospect of nihilism, I don't think that you can come back from that per se, from what I was able to ascertain from Nietzsche. So I went back to the question of why, and how so many humans are faced with this question every day. Well, why would I have to do that? Why would I have to do this? Why would I have to say this? Why would I have to do this in order to climb the corporate ladder? Why am I here? What's the meaning, right? If we're faced with this question, is that a way? Is having the question sitting in our soul at all times, because I think it sits in all of our souls. We just all interpret that different, and that's fine. Is this a way for our souls to keep us on a journey of existing? Whether or not you listen to the question that's in your soul, is it there for a purpose? Is it there to keep formulating new ideals through your life in order for you to continue to walk down the path, in order to continue to shed and grow and learn, right? It could just be your will, your drive, right? I know that Nietzsche touches on this, and another whole other philosopher, several philosophers touch on will versus drive. We all have drives as humans. Sexual drive, a drive for hunger and thirst, stuff like that. We have the drives. And it's the will, our will, put forth me to get up and go get a drink of water. That's a play on both of them. And when we're faced with this question, is it the drive or is it our willpower that's going to get the shit done and get us out of being a nihilist or having nihilistic thoughts or what have you? And so I've been generating lots of thoughts ever since October's Mindsight with this, because And I actually found this to be so heavy of a topic for me to dive into that I put it to rest until November 1st, until I could get through Samhain, because I wanted to be able to fully commit to that festival in terms of my practice, and I didn't want to be bogged down with any kind of like heavy information that would prevent me from being 100 in those rituals and things. So when I pulled this out, 15 or so days ago, I started diving really heavy into it, and I had already read a couple of Nietzsche's works, and like I said, it was either one or the other. It fills me with dread, or it fills me with like a new lease on life kind of a feeling, like a Ace of Wands type of a feeling. And I really did want to ask myself the question of why we're human, why we're existing. If there's not a meaning, if there is a meaning, what is it? And if there's not a meaning, what the hell's the point of existing? And it just seems like a paradox. Like this existentialism that's sitting heavy on all of our minds as humans. But is this a way for us to continue? Is this sitting on our soul just to keep us going? That's the drive and our will. It formulates in the soul. It churns, that question of why churns in the soul to keep the drive going, to keep the wheel spinning. And then that having the drive moving like a wheel literally activates our willpower. I think that's how it would work. And then it's not until you stop the wheel, you've put something into the wheel to stop it from moving, you no longer have a will. Like you no longer have the will to keep going. And that's some intense shit. Now, I'm not talking about life and death here, okay? Please understand, I'm talking about these terms in terms of nihilism, in terms of how Nietzsche would put it, and my own interpretations. Please read the disclaimer at the bottom of this video. Be 100, people. I think of, is it also a way for us to, is it also a thirst for knowledge? Like actual knowledge. We want to be sponges. Think of children. My children were so curious. It was beautiful. I mean, it's annoying for some adults, but my youngest, not so much my oldest, because he has more of a logical brain and tended to ask very specific questions. But my youngest is more like me, and he tends to think more abstractly about things and wants just a general answer that he can come up with his own abstract ideals around how he likes to think. My oldest is more scientific and wants a specific answer. No, I want to know the specifics. But like I said, my youngest was all about the why. Well, why? Well, why? Oh, okay. Why? If you've ever had a toddler like that, please let me know. But anyway, my youngest was like that, and it seemed to be a beautiful thing. I loved his curiosity because it just reminded me so much of my own. But there was a level in him that prevented him from ever gaining full capacity. He would never stop asking the question and the information doesn't work that way. When you get the information, it leads to another question, which leads to another question. And that's how curiosity blooms out. And so I think that maybe it's our thirst for knowledge deep in our soul. That's maybe another reason why that question of why sits down there. Is this feeling a way for us to know deep in our psyche that we cannot possibly know the answers to everything, and that the whole point of existing is to just be on the journey of continually learning about the sacred, or your relationship as secular to the sacred? Because I read that in a blog once, about this could be in terms of spirituality, like the question of why I'm here, why am I feeling like this, why am I suffering, and never having concrete answers as to who the creator is, who the right God is, what the right texts to read are, and it keeps us looped into the curiosity, just like my toddler. Just like the fact that my toddler would never, ever stop asking that question, because knowledge doesn't work that way. You're constantly going to be curious about this, and this. And it's just, you just keep going. And you don't just stay right here. You go like this. Through time. As you evolve and change, as you grow older. And it could be that as an adult, spiritually speaking, in terms of your relationship to deity, entities, God and goddess, whatever, creator entities, this relationship that we have with the divine and divinity as a whole, we can't possibly know hardly anything about this deity, but what we can only gain in our own brain. And so is this feeling and question of why, because why can be a feeling, is this a way for us to just already know that we can't know certain things, and that is what's activating the drive as well? And then the will, not the will, the willpower. And back to human suffering. Nietzsche has said that humans need meaning for our suffering. But if we, like me, there's a lot of emphasis in my spiritual practice with being human is suffering. And it's our purpose to go through these sufferings as little deaths throughout life, and to constantly gain more knowledge, gain more and more perspectives of how we're perceiving things. We're shifting our perspective and things like that. And we're going through the motions of being human. That in and of itself is beauty, and that in and of itself is existing, which equals living, which equals, yes, there is a meaning. If any of that made sense. Now, I want to talk about suffering in an abstract way. For me, if we let it, life would be full of suffering. Fatigue, boredom, laziness, annoyance, frustration. Those are forms of suffering. And we have to consider the fact that we only base our suffering on the few moments of bliss that we've had. Few. I can think on one hand times I was truly blissful. And I don't mean content, okay? Because contentment for me is like the highest state for me in this point in my life. Happiness maybe, but bliss? Hardly ever. Because why? Because we're not living just by ourselves on this hilltop, okay? Hardly any of us live monastic lives like that, to where we would be able to find our bliss because we have no one around us to generate any kind of nicks to our own ego. So me, in terms of my life, I would be living for my kids, living for my husband or my sister or whatever, living for my mom or my sister. And I have their kinds of voices in my head, right? And that sheds part of the bliss that I would feel in certain moments, because then I would be sharing the bliss, or I would be interpreting the bliss different, or I would feel negatively about the bliss because of such and such said this, you know? Oh, and like, why did that make you happy, Lennon? It's like, shut the hell up and let me be happy. So anyway, I'm just saying that for me could fill in time. Think back on the times where you were truly blissful, all by your lonesome. You weren't living for someone else. You were happy, and you were allowed to be happy for yourself. It's probably happened a few times. But what happens is we base those few moments of bliss that we ever had on what life is supposed to feel like. It becomes like a dopamine. It becomes a form of dopamine for us, a form of drug, where we would constantly be looking for the high of that bliss state. And then we forget that suffering is what we're supposed to feel on a daily. That bliss isn't the object of our lives. But because of the way our brain works on serotonin, norepinephrine, and all those things, we interpret bliss different. We interpret bliss as humans, and therefore that in and of itself is our downfall. That we put bliss on a pedestal, but what happens is, as a scale, suffering goes way down here. We don't even want to fuck with suffering because it's just too much on our brains. But for me, in order to get out of nihilistic mindsets and get out of constantly wanting to know the meaning of life, and therefore come to the realization that life has no meaning, you're not keeping the scales in balance. You're not keeping bliss, you're not keeping bliss and suffering to be endured like all the time. You look out for both. You look at both. You interpret them both as what they are, not either one on a pedestal. Nihilism would be like getting a lobotomy. And forgive me for that analogy. I just watched One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest again in my life. Oh, Jack Nicholson. If we don't have a meaning, or if we've convinced ourselves that there is not one, then we won't chase anything, bliss or otherwise. And then we become stagnant in our own bodies and in our own psyches and in our own personalities. We've locked in that will of the drive, and therefore not ever activating our willpower, we cease to live completely. The saying that got me through so much of my own suffering, is c'est la vie. C'est la vie. And that cut out your raison d'être. Cut out the purpose. That's life. Oh, I broke my pinky toe, but my boss said I can't stay out of work because I don't have any vacation days? Sure. Oh, I can't go to the doctor because my copay is, or my, what do you call it? You have to pay something in order to get seen. It's like $2,000. Oh, I don't have that, so I can't even go get seen by the doctor, so I'm gonna have to let this toe fix itself and wear as much ace bandages as I can. That's life. Now, I want to talk a little bit about hope for a second. I know I've been rambling for a minute here, but there was an example in Psychology Today. I may leave the article in the description box in the resource section. I like to fill that damn thing up with lots and lots for you guys. But it was about this man, and he wanted to stay in a state of hopelessness because he thought that by staying in that state, he would rather stay in that state than suffer brokenness, than suffer broken dreams, broken expectations. And I thought, wow, what a way to not live. What a way to not strive for anything. That shit needs some shadow work done. But anyway, I want to talk about hope. Hope is what is in the bottom of Pandora's box, right? In terms of mythos. Why would hope, please ask yourself this question. Why would hope be in the bottom of all those abominations? Of all that evil? Why would hope be in the bottom? If only evil went into the box, how is hope in the box? And we're going to look at this in terms of humans and suffering and bliss. All that negativity. What happened is the universe knows that without a tool, with just negativity coming out of this box, humanity, all of us, would be annihilated with suffering. The hope is for the future of humanity. It's the universe's way of telling us we have to have it in order to survive. In order for humanity to survive, we must have some sort of tool in our psyche to keep us going. And that just happened to be in this mythos, hope. Now, hope can have a shadow aspect to it. I'm going to leave a video by Ceridwens Cauldron. She did a fantastic video on hope that I want you to go watch. I'm going to leave it in the resource section of this video about, some of the shadows of hope. And I just feel like if evil and negativity were at least released onto the world in terms of Pandora's box, humans couldn't battle that with nothing. If it's just us and we have no hope and we have no meaning, whatever, if we have nothing, we can't battle this negativity. We'd just be annihilated. It'd be like a nuclear bomb went off. And we wouldn't survive. So hope is in the bottom for the future. Specifically for the future. It's the tool given to us by the universe to survive. Utilizing hope as a tool in terms of survival, I think is probably the best way to eradicate those thoughts of nihilism. Okay, so I've been on for 30 minutes. Oh my God. What I want you to do, okay, because this is Mindsight and I have an activity for all Mindsights. And I don't even know if people do these activities, but I make Google Drive files out of these cutesy little papers for you to download and do with what you will. Sometimes it's a tarot spread, sometimes it's a drawing, sometimes it's just something for you to meditate on, and today is no different. In terms of mythology, because we touched on that a little bit today, I want you to think on and possibly even read, if you're not familiar with Sisyphus and his bane of life. Now, Sisyphus was a king and he was avarice, and he was kind of condescending a little bit, to be honest with you. And he tricked and manipulated most people in his life. Okay. Anyway, long story short, he was condemned to push a boulder up a mountain. And then Hades enchanted the boulder to flop out of Sisyphus's grip right at the top and fall down. And then in one form of that mythos, Sisyphus says, I enjoy the view as I walk back down the mountain, because the boulder is going to go faster than him, right? And so he enjoys the view. That was a way for Sisyphus to generate a new meaning for his life. If he allowed nihilism and he allowed frustration and he allowed those dark thoughts to take over himself, then he would no longer have the will or the drive to push the boulder up, even though he was made to do that. That became his bane, but then that also, there was hope. There was hope that I know that the boulder's going to fall and I'll enjoy the view. It's kind of a way for us to read that story and be happy and think that Sisyphus would somehow be happy pushing the boulder up and enjoying the view on the way down. I want you to kind of meditate on the story, maybe read a small passage of this particular mythos and think on what your boulder would be. What would be the rock? What would be your responsibility? What would have you generating a different view on your responsibilities in your life? And what would be the view? And what would be your bane? What would be the boulder? What would be the view that kept you going? Okay, what gets you up in the morning? And I think that by cultivating thoughts like this is a fantastic way to gain perspective on your own life and how you think of your life, because we're all too busy just existing and actually living said life. We don't actually think about how we think of the life. And I think that the Sisyphus mythos is really fantastic upon studying this life is meaningless mentality. Even if you think that life does have meaning, it still is good to sit with that those feelings and see what your boulder is and see what your view is, because I think those are the two main portions of the story. I was not expecting to be on this long, but with Mindsight, I just tend to ramble all the time. So come back next new moon for I don't know if it'll be the last Mindsight. I'm going to cover that in December, but I've been doing this almost a year, and I'm so proud. So we may touch on all the subjects of the last 11 months in December. Who knows what I'll rope in. So I appreciate you coming and visiting me on Mindsight, and I hope to see everyone again on the channel. Much love.